interrupt our regularly scheduled programming in order to bring you the following special report on the Apollo 15 space mission. Here is ABC's Frank Reynolds.
Good afternoon from ABC Space Headquarters in New York. With me, Frank Borman, and ABC Science Editor Jules Bergman. Apollo 15 is now approximately 5,000 miles out from Earth and heading for home, moving toward a splashdown point in the Pacific, approximately 315 miles north of Hawaii. Carrier Okinawa is standing by to recover the astronauts and the command module, and that should happen in about 45 minutes from now. Frank, the astronauts have already been asked for their most memorable moments during this mission, but I suspect the ones they're about to experience will be equally memorable.
I think probably even more so. They've had certainly many of them in the last 2 weeks, but stepping out on the carrier is a great experience.
Yes, indeed. Jules, there's been a course correction required.
Right, Frank. About an hour and a half ago, the astronauts did perform what's called a mid-course maneuver number 7 to correct their targeting point. It was a slight error. They would have landed some 60 miles short of that prime aircraft carrier, the recovery vessel, the Okinawa. They did the burn about 6 feet per second. It went perfectly. We're now informed by the Navy recovery forces that Apollo 15 is on target to splash down some 315 miles north of Oahu. It's been a long day for the astronauts already. They were awakened early this morning by Capcom Joe Allen with a raucous Hawaiian war chant.
Suswa, good Endeavor crew. Suswa, rise and shine. It's Splashdown Day.
Oh, my.
Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Joe. That got everybody up.
And Dave Scott didn't think that was so funny.
I'm not sure that I'd appreciate having the Hawaiian war chant blast into my ears as you're struggling up out of sleep. Did they pull anything like that on you, Frank?
No, I don't believe they did. We listened to country and western music most of the way.
Oh, boy. Well, that takes a certain ear, too, I guess. Well, we are less than 44 minutes from splashdown.
ABC's coverage of the flight of Apollo 15 is brought to you by Tang, the same instant breakfast drink that's aboard Apollo 15. And by the 3M Company. 3M. People still count here.
2, 1, 0.
You are aboard a spaceship, an amazing two-part ship that goes more than 17,000 miles an hour, carries 12 passengers or tons of cargo, lands as easily as an airplane, and can fly up to 100 missions. And this is not the year 2000. This is 1978, the year the space shuttle begins its work in space, tending our satellites, servicing a great space station in Earth orbit, ferrying its supplies and personnel. And if the future is like the present, Tang will be in its galley. Orange-flavored Tang, the instant breakfast drink with more vitamin C than orange juice. Good, nutritious Tang for spacemen and Earth families.
Frank, you've come home twice from space, once in Gemini and then again, of course, in Apollo 8. What's it like to know that you're about to end this long journey?
Well, it was a great feeling, and of course on Apollo 8, we encountered the first supercircular entry, and there was a certain amount of not anxiety, but awareness. That's a nice term, awareness in the whole situation.
Very much aware of the fact that you were going to do something that had never at that time been done before.
Had never been done before, and of course we'd worked out the procedures ourselves, and we were very anxious that we hit the corridor. As you know, the corridor, entry corridor, is a very critical measurement on all these flights.
I recall, it seems to me, Frank, Jules, as we remember Apollo 8, that you were concerned not only about hitting the re-entry corridor, but also about the appearance that you would present to the world as you emerged from the helicopter there. You recall that?
I recall that, that's right. I don't have a very heavy beard, and I was kitted quite a great deal after Gemini 7, so I decided that I would be properly groomed on the helicopter.
How did you...
Properly groomed you were, and just in case you do not recall it as vividly, we happen to have some videotape here that just might refresh your memory. All this happened a few years ago in December of 1968.
And a great cheer goes up from the sailors out here on the flight deck.
Bearded Borman. What did you have, a battery powered
Very good
electric
condition.
Yes.
Needing a shave, of course.
Well, that brings back
Shaking
fine
hands with
memories.
Ben
It doesn't
James,
seem like it was almost
Captain
3 years
shaking
ago.
hands with Ben James. Walking slowly down the red carpet, accompanied by John Stonecipher and Ben James.
Whatever happened to Bill Anders? There he is.
Lovell having a very noticeable beard. Frank Borman looks as if he is shaved.
Shaved you had. When did you do it? In the chopper on
And
the
the
way?
chopper coming back, yes. This was one of the great plans we had, and the helicopter crew was very nice and brought a shaver.
Oh, you had issued that command before you left?
More in the form of a request.
It'd be interesting to see the way Scott, Jim Irwin, and Al Worden looked. Yesterday during the mid-flight news conference, a mustachioed, heavily bearded Dave Scott, Worden, and Irwin turned up. I wonder if they've got an electric racer aboard, or just will come out long-bearded.
Well, we really don't care what their appearance is, do we? Just as long as we get a chance to see them as they step out onto the deck of the carrier. That should happen less than 40 minutes from now. ABC's coverage of the flight of Apollo 15 continues after this commercial message.
If you're a businessman buried under too much information, 3M Microfilm has a system to get you out from under. It starts here with the finders and the keepers, 3M Microfilm readers and reader printers that find information in seconds, and 3M Microfilm cameras that keep all that information here. 3M also has the planners, systems analysts who cut information handling costs with equipment like this 3M comm system that cuts the cost of handling computer data. 3M has trainers who teach employees how to get the most out of microfilm. And maintainers, highly skilled technicians for fast professional service whenever it's needed. Complete microfilm systems come from 3M. See them. The finders, keepers, planners, trainers, and maintainers at your 3M Business Products Center.
All right, we're back at ABC Space Headquarters. The latest information from Houston and the tracking information that's been received indicates that the astronauts are right on course, coming down in the middle of that 30-mile wide corridor that they must find in order to come back to Earth successfully. The weather report from the landing area, some 315 miles or so north of Hawaii, indicates that things are going to be quite acceptable there. Conditions are officially labeled good, visibility with some 10 to 12 miles, the wind at about 10 knots, and the wave height is said to be about 3 or 4 feet and slightly choppy. But that does not seem to present any problem. Of course, on the re-entry, the astronauts come back into the Earth's atmosphere, and at that point, Frank Borman has described the sensation inside the command module as being inside a neon tube, because things get kind of hot, and the light suddenly becomes very evident as they make that scorching re-entry. One of the traditions we have here at ABC News is that just before that happens, Jules Bergman re-enters the Earth's atmosphere with his own acetylene torch and a heat shield. Jules, we're ready for you to do your stuff.
Frank, we've pre-ignited the Frank Reynolds Memorial blowtorch as part of this demonstration. It will be a searing and a hot re-entry. It'll begin some 1,100 miles west of the target point, smack over Australia when Apollo 15 arcs in to begin encountering the Earth's thicker atmosphere at about 400,000 feet. And then is when the heat shield, a phenolic epoxy, a plastic resin, begins to do its job of soaking up the heat. And this model, made from exactly the same kind of plastic, it's a honeycomb structure. It chars away, it physically ablates, and the astronauts will see, as we think Frank Borman did, bits of plastic particle sailing past their window. Let's see if we can reignite this torch. There we go. And it physically burns up and ablates somewhat like that. Sailing past their window, it acts like a heat sink, cooling down the 5,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature they encounter on the way back in. This, by the way, is exactly what the material looks like. The plastic blocks are filled in here, if we can see that again. Plastic is inserted into this honeycomb titanium steel structure. Frank Borman, did you actually see the plastic and burning as it went by?
Yes, Jules, you could see bits of the heat shield breaking off and coming past the windows. And of course, equally impressive was the reaction jets that maintain your attitude during entry. They fire quite frequently, and they're loud and quite visible from the cockpit.
Was there much conversation in the cockpit as you came
Well, as you know, Jim Lovell and I had both flown before. Jim had flown twice, and we were, as we approached entry, we were joshing Bill Anders about what it was going to be like and kind of overplaying what we thought it was going to be like. As we really entered on Apollo, it was so impressive that Jim and I were quieted, and our eyes got a little large themselves. So I think Bill ended up the winner in that go-around.
The sensation, I suppose, is probably quite similar, but there's a big difference between coming back from a lunar mission, is there not, and say, an Earth orbit re-entry.
Well, there certainly is. There's a large difference. The G-forces are quite a bit heavier on the lunar entry. You have a great amount more energy to absorb. And, of course, the ranging that you do in Apollo is much more controlled and over a longer period than we did in Gemini.
I think, Jules, you ought to demonstrate
that.
The
speed is much greater to begin with. We've just heard word from Apollo Control that they're now about 3,300 miles out. The speed's built up to something like 20,000 miles an hour. It'll get as fast as 25,000 miles an hour. And, of course, what's happened here is the Earth's gravity draws you in, Frank, as you know, and you start going faster and faster until you hit that maximum speed of around 25,000 miles an hour, or 36,000 feet per second, as Mission Control will describe it. And about 21 minutes from now, at about 15 minutes before splashdown, here's what's supposed to happen. They'll separate from the service module like this, including that scientific instrument module with all those cameras and instruments they got material on the moon with. They separate from the service module at a 45-degree angle. They are heads down, by the way. We couldn't see the angle. The hatch and the windows are facing down. They separate. The service module pulls away on its reaction control thrusters, and then they face themselves down, and they've already been at about a 6.5-degree lifting angle, and start the actual hot part of the reentry as we described it with the heat shield.
And very hot it is, too. Then they'll be out of communications after they come in for about 3 minutes, 35 seconds or so, before we actually get the confirmation that they've come through the Earth's atmosphere and are about to descend. Well, splashdown is now about 33 minutes and 40 seconds or so from now. ABC's coverage of the flight of Apollo 15 will continue after this commercial message.
The lunar rover isn't very big or very fast. It hasn't got leather upholstery or 300 horses under the hood. But it's the most amazing land vehicle ever invented, because the land it drives on is the moon. And when it goes there, Tang goes too. Orange-flavored Tang, the instant breakfast drink with more vitamin C than orange juice. Good, nutritious Tang for spacemen and Earth families.
What happens inside your system to plain aspirin and bufferin? This illustrates most of bufferin with its extra speed is already going to your headache, when most of plain aspirin is still in your stomach. So with bufferin, there's less to upset your stomach when there's more pain reliever going to your headache. Bufferin, faster to your headache, better for your stomach.
32 minutes and 25 seconds or so before splashdown. Now, the trajectory as they come in from deep space is also different, of course, in this mission, as it is in all lunar missions. Jules, I think you might be a good idea to demonstrate that, too.
We had them, we had Irwin, Scott, and Warden starting that reentry, coming back into that 6.5-degree angle, facing down to the local horizontal or the horizon, and then they start sailing down some 1,000 miles west of the landing area, near just about over Australia, and continue their descent, speed built up, and we're going to let Frank Borman continue to describe how you can actually govern or control where you land. Frank, show us that.
This Apollo is an amazing vehicle. Although it has no wings, it does generate lift. We can use this pin as a lift vector, or the way that it's propelled due to its aerodynamic shape. As it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, you enter with your head down, but the lift vector up. You actually go down and dig into the atmosphere, are swung back up, and then in a very critical maneuver, the spacecraft rotates 180 degrees to pull you back down to the ocean. And as you start back down, then it rotates again 90 degrees, and then you modulate your range where you are going to hit in the ocean by rotating back and forth, and essentially banking as you would in an airplane, and controlling your impact point.
If you come in too steeply, the impact is just too strong. And yet if you come in too shallow, of course, why you skip right back out into space.
Right, and we're getting the word now. We're getting the word now from Apollo Control, by the way, that they're yawing the spacecraft and the service module for that separation from the service module.
Here's our first glimpse now of the Okinawa. Let's go downrange.
And here we are, 315 miles north of Hawaii. The prime recovery vessel, the aircraft carrier, the Navy calls it an LPH, or a landing pad helicopter, Okinawa.
Weather looks good, huh?
Certainly does. And that ocean, even more important to the crew, that ocean looks calm.
4-foot wave heights, and a fairly gentle 7 or 8 knot wind.
Where are we getting this picture from? A helicopter, I guess. Must be, huh?
This is apparently a helicopter relayed to the portable satellite communication station on the carrier, then up to one of our unmanned spacecraft, an unmanned satellite, relaying it back to this country. The Okinawa is steaming on station. It's an 18,000-ton carrier, just about 10 years old, one of the few modern vessels the Navy seems to have these days.
What did you land on, Frank? The Yorktown, wasn't it?
Yes, Yorktown. Yes, you know, I was up in Boston the other day and happened to see it's been decommissioned now, and I had an old nostalgic twang as I saw it laying there being dismantled at the Boston Naval Yard.
It's a good day. They were talking about 40% cloud cover at 2,000 feet, and it looks just about that.
There you go.
Little private messages there.
They're coming up on the separation burn now. They're separated from the service module.
10 seconds.
It's a beautiful day out here in the Pacific. The primary recovery forces are now in splashdown position. 330.
Some audio tangled in.
All right, let's get a report now from correspondent Dave Horowitz on the Okinawa.
We're in position, hovering just off the ship. It's warm out here, 80 degrees, the humidity is 67%, the water temperature is 77. We had some showers during the night, but we don't expect any more. There's a thin band of high clouds over about a 250-mile area in the recovery zone, and this could hamper visual sighting of those main parachutes that will carry the command module to splashdown. But weather is not expected to cause any problems in recovery. The seas are smoother than they've been in some time, and everyone is in position. This is David Horowitz aboard the USS Okinawa.
And as the Okinawa steams on station, we're waiting confirmation from Apollo Control. There's separation. Confirmation of separation. So they've let go of that big service module that's been, as it were, their store for life-giving oxygen, water, batteries and electrical power, and all those scientific instruments and cameras they carried around the moon for so many days with them. And the spacecraft is now due to come up over on Australia to begin the toughest part of the reentry. Actually, Frank, it's probably the toughest part of the flight for the Apollo command module itself, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's also the most strenuous part of the flight for the crew from the standpoint of physical forces on the body.
You said you encountered as much as 8 Gs or 8 times your own weight for a short pulse there.
For a short pulse during this dip that we talked about, and then after that it levels off to about 4 Gs.
Let's listen.
Houston, 15, loud and clear. Roger, same with you.
Dave Scott talking to Capcom.
And Houston, 15, we got a good sep. Roger, looks good down here. Thank you.
Have a good separation.
Service module, they pulled away from the service module. One of the phenomenal things is how lucky these recoveries have been on all these Apollo flights, Frank. They always seem to manage to come down in between typhoons in the Pacific, on calm seas and sunny skies.
The Okinawa has been on station, of course, for some time now. Looking forward to the moment very shortly from now when they will actually accomplish their mission. And for a report now on the activities on the Okinawa prior to this day, here again is correspondent Horowitz.
several weeks, this recovery team has covered more than 4,000 miles in the Pacific, rehearsing for today's splashdown. Almost every other day, they practice. In this scene, most helicopters were a few miles away, hovering over the simulated recovery area, and the deck looked quiet. But inside, the ship was drilling intensely, as though each exercise was the real splashdown. Every possible complication to a normal recovery challenged swift and precise reaction. Captain Andrew Huff commands this prime recovery ship.
Captain, report neutral wind 070, 829.
Okay. This is Garrett. Come right to neutral course 070. All ahead full. Dan, I think if we go on down this way about 4 hours, 4 miles, we'll get in the clearing away from these rain showers and be in good position.
All right, Captain. It'll only take about 4 miles. We should be out of it.
Doc, you think we'll be well clear of the rain by that time?
Halo, primary. All aircraft are airborne.
Much of the job of recovery is done below decks, where dozens of men in partially lighted rooms plot the course of the ship, the aircraft, and the command module.
There it is, right? Send up to the bridge.
Complicated charts map every foot of the 300-square-mile recovery area. Sophisticated radio equipment provides contact, and the wireless communications are converted to charts so that everyone can see what's happening. Constant communications with Houston's Mission Control Center is maintained by NASA's recovery supervisors. But the Okinawa's prime job is launching and supporting helicopters, which will bring the astronauts to a happy landing on the ship.
05, trainers Okinawa Tower, radio check.
Hello, radio.
All right, go.
DC American Sergeant, the officers of West on working on snatching everything back up to the top side so I don't lose my circuits again, okay?
Helicopter Squadron 1 from Imperial Beach Naval Air Station in California has never recovered any astronauts before, but since it was formed in 1948, it has rescued more than 1,500 GIs and civilians. This job is probably their most complicated, and they've been training for it for months. So the primary recovery ship, the helicopter squadron, and all those involved in this complicated recovery in the Pacific are standing by and ready to pick up the Apollo 15 astronauts as they return to Earth from man's longest and most challenging mission to the moon. This is David Horowitz aboard the USS Okinawa.
All right, thank you very much. That was a videotape report on the activities of on board the Okinawa prior to the actual splashdown. We are now 22 minutes and 31 seconds from that point of splashdown. ABC's coverage of the flight of Apollo 15 will continue after this commercial message.
For thousands of years, man has yearned to touch the stars, to touch them. The dream of centuries, growing closer with each year. In a few years, part of that dream is going to come true. A great space station orbiting the Earth. An artificial world where a dozen men will live for 6 months at a time, unlocking the mysteries of space and probing the Earth's resources as man never could before. And even as they do what man has never done, they will do the things that all men do. Sleep, grow hungry, daydream, laugh. And when the clock says breakfast, they will probably begin with Tang, the orange-flavored instant breakfast drink with more vitamin C than orange juice. Good, nutritious Tang for spacemen and Earth families.
We'll be back with more on the flight of Apollo 15 after station identification. Shirley MacLaine stars in Shirley's World in September on ABC. ABC's coverage of the flight of Apollo 15 is being brought to you by Tang, the same instant breakfast drink that's aboard Apollo 15. And by Bufferin, so fast to your headache, so gentle on your stomach.
Back at ABC Space Headquarters, this is Frank Reynolds with Frank Borman and Jules Bergman. The latest word from Mission Control in Houston to Apollo 15. A short message, you're looking good. And looking good they are indeed. Jules?
And they're about 6.5 minutes from the beginning of that searing re-entry, some 19.5 minutes from splashdown, scheduled to take place 315 miles north of Oahu, with the prime aircraft carrier, the prime recovery carrier, the Okinawa, standing by, together with a Navy attack oiler and a tanker to help out in case it's needed. And we understand that's not the only thing standing by out there, Frank.
Yes, the word is that there's a Russian seagoing tug, the Malfa, which ironically enough was built in Texas during the war, only about 100 miles east of Houston. Here we're looking at live pictures now from the
camera's trying to pick
deck
up
of the Okinawa. This Russian tug has been following the recovery ships for the past 24 hours. We're told now it's about some 2 to 5 miles away from the Okinawa. I don't see anything necessarily sinister in that. Do you, Frank?
No, I don't think so.
The Russians want to get in on the show. They'd like to see the thing come down.
Well, probably the most interesting thing about it is the Russians want to watch our techniques. Maybe they still plan to land men on the moon, as they say they do someday in the future.
Well, although all the old antagonisms remain, or at least some of them, made some great progress lately with the Russians, and particularly in the area of space flight.
I think that's one of the great hopes, that this will be an arena where we can cooperate. And I think that to date we've done fairly well.
Right. That was something you started, Frank Borman. You were on the original negotiating team with the Russians, and now it looks like we are going to have a joint rescue capability with Apollo and Soyuz and Salyut spacecraft able to dock with one another.
Let's listen now.
The Air Force Apollo range aircraft calling Apollo 15. No signal yet. What happens here, of course, is the spacecraft is now around the curve of the Earth, too low for its radio signals to reach direct back to the NASA tracking station. So Air Force KC-135 or 707 airplanes, they call these Orion aircraft, act as flying relay stations and pick up the comm, the communications from the crew.
Apollo 15 actually begins its entry in the neighborhood of Australia.
Right, about 4 minutes from now. And they've now built up to pretty near their maximum velocity of 25,000 miles an hour. Must feel pretty good, Frank, when you hear one of those Air Force K-birds or KCs calling you.
It is. We did have trouble with the KC-135s or the Orion airplanes on our mission, but they've been better with every succeeding mission.
Right. And
we are about 3 minutes away now from re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. You're looking at the view of the Pacific skies from the deck of the Okinawa. For another report from the Okinawa, let's go to correspondent Dave Horowitz.
With about 3 minutes away from entry interface, Okinawa is about 332 miles north of Honolulu and in position for the splashdown of Apollo 15. 5 helicopters taking part in the recovery of the astronauts are now in position near the ship. The weather out here is not perfect, but it's almost perfect. There are scattered clouds which could obscure the vision of the command module and those large parachutes that will gently lower it down into the Pacific. The weather is not expected to cause any problems with that recovery. The seas are a little smoother than they've been in some time. The temperature out here is fairly warm, 80 degrees, humidity about 67%, water temperature at 77. There was some rain during the night, but our weather forecaster tells us that there's no fear of any rain in the area during the recovery. Everyone is on station on the Okinawa. David Horowitz reporting from aboard the USS Okinawa.
They're on station, and some of them, anyway, seem to be quite thoroughly relaxed.
Well, they've been out there a couple of weeks practice, and this will probably be the most exciting thing outside of spurious submarine signals they pick up for some time. And we're like a minute and a half away from the beginning of re-entry over Australia for Apollo 15. Spacecraft now at its maximum speed of more than 25,000 miles an hour and about to sail into the Earth's atmosphere, as it were.
Velocity 35,710 feet per second. Range to splash 1,725 nautical miles.
Right over Australia at just about 25,000 miles an hour.
Getting very little in the way of communication between the spacecraft in Houston.
This is the one point in the flight where the ground is really of not much use. The energy interchange is so rapid that we never worried about communications with the ground here. There was always great concern from the ground, but there was never any concern in the spacecraft.
What happens is going to happen anyway, and there's nothing can be done about it at this point.
We're committed here.
Velocity 35,910 feet per second. Range to go 1,507 nautical miles. 35 seconds to entry.
So just about 25,000 miles an hour speed.
See some of Admiral Zumwalt's sailors there.
Yes, a few beards here and there. Sideburns.
I
It's
guess
still not a hippie Navy, though, is it?
They probably locked the Marines below deck on occasions when they have the TV camera.
Range 1,307 nautical miles.
Over Australia now. And here's the beginning of entry. We're watching our own ABC animation of the entry process, the re-entry, as it will take place for the next few minutes until the spacecraft emerges from the radio blackout that'll hit it in a few minutes, and we'll be able to hear the Apollo 15 crew talking. Here's the searing part of the re-entry beginning with the heat shield soaking up the enormous energy and speed.
We're into the blackout now.
What do you feel inside the spacecraft, Frank Borman?
Well, slowly at this point in the entry, the G-forces are building up, and it gets increasingly difficult to breathe. At the depth of the initial pullout, you're pulling about 8 Gs, and it's very difficult to breathe, but this lasts for only about 30 seconds. The crew now is monitoring the entry, the autopilot entry, with their own instruments, standing by, ready to take over manually in the event of a computer malfunction. In a moment, the spacecraft will be started back up again, and those maneuvers that I mentioned earlier, the rapid rotations to ensure capture, will be taking place. Inside the spacecraft, it's very bright now, almost as if you're inside a neon tube. Temperature outside is about 5,000 degrees. Inside at 68.
Right.
This really was a point of high interest in the mission. I hate to use the word anxious because you're really committed. You've jumped. You're off the diving board and you're just there now. But it was exciting. About this time also, the moon in our flight, the moon came through the window and the stars. It was a very exciting part of the flight.
Can you tell whether the right things are happening as they happen?
Yes, you can. And I'll tell you, we were very concerned monitoring the entry monitoring system. And as a matter of fact, at about this point, I got a glitch, and it indicated that we were pulling way too many Gs. Of course, my own senses told me that the instrument was incorrect, but I think my heartbeat probably jumped about 40 or 50 beats there. In a moment, we should be getting a call from them.
Right, they're...
as they get through the ion sheet.
About another few moments. They should be out of blackout.
This is a series of must-do events here. You have, of course, the heat shield has to work, the reaction control system has to work, and then finally your drogue has to work, your main parachute has to work, and then I always used to think, well, after all that worked, if you got on the ocean and it had a leak, you'd be in deep trouble.
That's right. These are the only moments when, well, the only moments when the spacecraft is really put to its severest test. At liftoff, it never achieves these speeds in an atmosphere, nor does it have to float, assuming the liftoff goes all right. But as you say, it all happens here very quickly.
On our mission, we hit so hard that some water was forced in a vent tube, and I got about 3 gallons of water right in my face.
There's one of the calls going out to one of the aircraft to see if they can pick up the Apollo 15 crew. And we'll hear Recovery 1, Swim 1 or Swim 2, the 3 primary helicopters in the area, calling in a moment.
I hope the ships are in the right place. You know, this all Air Force crew can expect the service that we usually expect from the Navy.
Well, they played them anchors away to wake them up yesterday, Frank, so the Navy has to be there.
Should be coming out of blackout now.
I'd stand by for a call.
Right.
Apollo 15, Houston, how do you read?
And aboard the carrier, they can hear an enormous sonic boom as the spacecraft dives through the atmosphere at high speed and slows down.
Apollo 15, Houston, how do you read?
Team, EMS and GS-10 agree within about 10 miles. Everybody's in fine shape.
Very good, Dave. Good to hear you again.
That's it.
That's the crew. Dave Scott saying that they're agreeing within 10 miles and it's all in fine shape. He's comparing his entry entrance to the computer.
They've come through the blackout.
In good shape.
And through the re-entry.
Right. And it looks like not only came through re-entry well, but that mid-course corrective maneuver put them right on the money to get them down close to the carrier. And assuming the parachutes aren't hidden behind any clouds, with any luck, we'll be picking up with a chance of picking them up in about 2 or 3 minutes. What happens here is that first at 23,000 feet, about a minute and a half from now, 2 drogue chutes come out to stabilize and slow the spacecraft a little bit.
Radar contact.
Radar contact from the Okinawa, those big antennas we saw locked on.
Showing range about 100 miles.
First, the 2 17.5-foot drogue parachutes, then 3 pilot parachutes, then at 10,000 feet, the 3 huge main chutes, 83.5 feet, which slow the spacecraft down to about a gentle 21 miles an hour when it splashes down. And
you can see everybody on the carriers now beginning to look up.
Watching the western horizon anxiously.
Let's get another report from the carrier now, and correspondent Dave Horowitz.
The Okinawa now has radar contact with the command module Endeavour. Houston reports that it has voice contact with the command module. About 30 seconds from now, the apex cover of 300-pound lid should separate from the top of the command module, and the drogue chutes, those smaller chutes that will pull out those larger parachutes that will lower the command module down into the Pacific, should open. That's just seconds from now. The Okinawa is in position about 5 miles from splashdown. All helicopters are on station. An excited crew aboard the ship. Everyone looking up now, looking to the skies for the first glimpse of that parachute, for the first glimpse of the command module Endeavour and the 3 Apollo astronauts aboard. Still no sighting. Momentarily, those drogue chutes should open. This is David Horowitz aboard the USS Okinawa.
All right, let's keep the picture right on there, just in case we get a chance to
see them?
Depending exactly where, we may see them directly. Out of 42,000 feet, they're saying. Still pretty small to spot, and still you wouldn't see any shoots.
They still, well, they haven't opened.
It's amazing how the picture can be so good and the audio quality so scratchy out there.
Should be on the drogue chute now.
Fuel contact. Bearing 120 from the ship.
Yeah, I think they made a visual contact
Right.
bearing from the ship.
So they're saying 120 degrees, or...
And he should be on the mains now.
About 12 miles visibility, and that light cloud cover might just be hiding the spacecraft, even though the main chutes are open.
Visual contact again. I have 120 from the ship. 1.5 bearing is 130 to.
There it is.
There it is.
There it is.
Visual contact, three main chutes.
There they go.
We're showing about a minus 0.6 on the mid distance, and everybody's in good shape.
Dave Scott.
Everybody in good shape.
We got a visual on you on the screen in here.
4 minutes to splashdown, and they're descending through around...
Recovery has recovery beacon contact bearing 175 magnetic on station.
Descending through about 7,000 feet now.
Okinawa, this is swim 2. I have a visual contact bearing 010 at approximately 1 mile. My position 134 Okinawa, 8.5 miles. Altitude is about 6,000 feet to the command module.
6,000 feet. They're in a light cloud deck. We should see them pop out in a minute. 3 minutes and 20 seconds from splash.
Let's hear again from the correspondent on the Okinawa, David Horwitz.
Heading into a rather puffy cloud bank. In fact, we've got 2 helicopters heading up. One of them being the swim helicopter with 3 frogmen aboard.
Looks like the one shoot.
But still no visual sighting of those 3 big parachutes, orange and white in color.
Looks like one chute is partially collapsed there.
Right. Yeah. One looks like it's caught in the shrouds of the other, but it is. It is as far as we can tell. The center chute.
Streamer on one chute.
Right.
They're burning off the excess oxidizer and fuel
Right,
now.
from the reaction.
Have no
control
worry.
thrusters.
The spacecraft is designed to land on 2 chutes, so
Right.
there's no problem.
It'll just come down about 7 miles an hour faster, but no
they're all
danger to
right.
the crew. Right.
Crew's fine.
It's that one appears to be streaming.
But as we can see, it's still descending pretty gently.
3 chutes were open, so they've had a... it may open again.
Extra fuel hazard status on that work off.
This has been a flight with glitches every day.
Apollo 15, Apollo 15, this is recovery, over.
Stay with it.
Back into that cloud, soft cumulus cloud bank now. They should be through about 1,500 feet. Looked like one of the lines got hung up, Frank, from the chutes.
Apollo 15, Apollo 15, this is recovery, over. Roger, recovery 15, here, 5 square, everybody's in good shape. Roger, Apollo 15, if you
Dave Scott saying everybody's in good shape, even though only 2 chutes are open. The third chute's apparently trying to get open.
There's a good shot.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Gently.
Stand by for a hard impact. Okinawa, over. Roger. Splashdown, mark splashdown.
Very good.
It's a fantastic shot.
Landing velocity on 2 chutes is 28 feet per second, or 32 feet per second versus 28 feet on 3 chutes.
Down a little faster.
It is in stable 1 condition.
It'll look like a hard impact, but the spacecraft appears to be all right. It hasn't turned over.
One main chute appears to be still attached to the command module.
Back from the moon. Thank you.
Back from the moon and floating.
Right.
Hello, this is Okinawa, mark on top, over. This is Polo, Roger, await.
Well, that was their little mechanical problem of the day, which almost wasn't so little.
Apollo 15,
Everybody's in good shape, Dave Scott's saying. So.
Polo, mark 1307 miles. Okinawa, Roger. Okinawa, this is Swim 2 on station. Be advised, I have a smoke on the apex cover, bearing approximately 010 from the command module at 1,000 yards. So Okinawa, Roger, will request permission to drop over main chutes.
They'll be very interested in recovering the chutes. As we see, we had a failure on one of them, so I'm sure that one of the things they'll try to do first now is get that chute.
Did it look like that third chute had opened at first, Frank?
It had opened at first.
Recovery, Roger, your key pulse on 243.0.
And word is relayed they're 7 miles away from the carrier. The command module impacted or splashed down 7 miles from the carrier, which is perfectly close.
We had concern in the past in burning off the reaction control fuel that it might interact with the nylon in the chute. The thing that was interesting here was they went into a cloud with 3 chutes open. They started burning off the reaction control fuel, and they came out with 2 chutes. So I'm sure that this will keep the people busy for some time.
And the thing I didn't like was one part of the center chute seemed to be hitting one of the other main chutes that was open. If that had gotten folded up, it would have been a very serious moment.
As I pointed out during the descent, though, we did design the spacecraft to land with 2 chutes, and
good idea.
That point was well taken.
Bouncing around about.
That's a great spacecraft and a terrible boat. About this time in Apollo 8, I was reaching for a nausea bag.
Frank, they must have been aware that third chute was not up.
Yes, they were. As a matter of fact, I heard them they can see the chutes also out the window, and then I heard them say stand by for a hard impact, although that impact didn't really look hard to me. I'll consider the spacecraft didn't go all the way under the water, as we've had in the past.
It did hit, though.
It also seemed to hit, perhaps it wasn't as hard as it might have been, because it seemed to hit between swells rather than chopping into the top of the swell. That's an all Air Force crew aboard there, Frank, so presumably these are the most uncomfortable moments for them.
Well, the temperature was fine. It was 80 degrees, 67% humidity. They've got ventilating fans that are on now, and the crew is just lying there waiting for the helicopter.
Just occurred to me this is the longest U.S. manned space flight, except for Gemini 7, which you and Jim Lovell flew.
About to jump.
It almost took your record away.
Here goes the frogman.
Let's see, these frogmen should be getting ready to go. He's right down on the deck, isn't he?
003 is a swim one of the primary frogmen helicopters with the flotation colors.
I think what they're trying to do here is to grab one of those chutes.
Contact Orion 1. Here's Orion 1.
There goes the life raft. I remember when they opened the hatch and a fine young Navy frogman looked at me and said, "Merry Christmas, sir." Welcome words.
Looks like they wanted that raft down there first.
Recovery reports the swimmers will be going in shortly.
Swimmers in there to cut the chutes away, I think.
Yes, you see, they ordinarily would be released, but they've not gotten release of the chutes from the command module here.
Well, something looks like it was wronger, if you will, or more wrong than just the RCS, the reaction control system fuel, getting on those lines.
I think it's probably not wise to even speculate now.
While we're waiting for the swimmers to drop there, let's replay that splash. We can do it in slow motion. And at the moment of impact, we'll just freeze so that you can see the impact. Here it goes down.
32 feet per second, about 25 miles an hour as it hits the water. Boop. That looks like a sizable impact.
Yeah, I think they felt that.
They may have.
Well,
We felt ours.
We ought to, of course, the struts on their couches absorb some of the impact, don't they, Frank?
We have never had a landing hard enough to even begin to move those struts.
Really?
No.
The honeycomb wasn't used either?
Never has been. It's primarily designed, as you know, for land landing, and we haven't stroked the struts at all on anything. There they go.
Outside of the command module in a ring. The astronauts have just communicated by voice to the ship that everything is okay. They're feeling fine. Getting back to the procedure, a hook will be attached to one of the eyelets on the bottom of the command module. It, in turn, will be attached to a line 50 feet long. At the other end of that line will be a parachute, about 8 feet in diameter. That parachute will be opened underwater and will serve as what is called a sea anchor. Doing that job will be almost like opening an umbrella underwater. We haven't seen the Russian trawler since before Splashdown, but we've been informed that the Russian trawler is now steaming into a position where it can watch what's going on just off the front of the Okinawa. The sea anchor is now in position. Its main job is to prevent the command module from drifting.
It's an incredible
As
ride.
that command module pitches a little bit in the sea, which is relatively calm, the bottom of it is black. When it left Earth, it was white. It naturally was charred during re-entry. It's surprising that the command module Endeavour is as bright and shiny as it is. In the past, that gold mylar coating has come back a little singed and brown. There are 5 windows in the module. At this point, what the astronauts have probably done is turn their ventilating system on and now have inflated manually a switch which activates an air compressor and inflate some bags, nylon bags, which will help further keep the module in an upright position, although there's no danger of the module either tilting on its side or turning over in these calm seas out here in the Pacific.
And we can see the swimmers working in the water around the Endeavour command module.
Feet of shroud lines.
We suspect they'll try to cut away the shroud lines or unhook them and save the parachute. Although I think probably the flotation collar, Frank, could be in place even with the shroud lines there.
Yes, I don't know if you noticed, they do have one man going after that chute,
Right.
and I would suspect that they're even delaying the astronauts are perfectly safe and comfortable, and the interest now is to get that chute that failed.
And it isn't that bad a sea state. Looks like about 3 or 4 foot waves. Just enough of a rolling, churning motion to let them know they're back on Earth.
They will have the shroud or the buoyancy ring on in a moment, and I imagine that those shroud lines that remain on the capsule will give them a little trouble, but these people have practiced and practiced and practiced, and they work with great efficiency. I don't suspect any problem.
See some of the frogmen in the water on the side of the Endeavour command module.
There will be some brief ceremonies once the astronauts are actually on the deck of the Okinawa. This time, of course, they do not have to go into quarantine. That's one change from past missions to the moon. As a matter of fact, they'll be in Pearl Harbor tomorrow and then
Houston late tomorrow night.
To Houston. Yes.
Right. So it'll be a speedy return to Houston from Pearl Harbor.
There's the collar, just dropped now.
Coming up.
They'll have several weeks of very heavy work ahead of them, telling all the wonders that they've seen and analyzing the rock or helping to point out the rock samples.
But they'll be able to go home instead of being locked out twice.
And there ought to be some pretty phenomenal film and pictures they've brought back from the moon.
I imagine we'll see them probably tomorrow night or the day after.
The first pictures are due to come out sometime Tuesday morning in Houston. And
when did the first moon rocks get to Houston?
Same time as the crew does, late
astronauts,
tomorrow night. On a second Air Force C-141 transport plane. Some of those pictures, Dave Scott described that one crystalline rock and said they found it atop a large brown rock sitting there by itself like it had been waiting for them.
On a pedestal.
And a pedestal had been there millions of years.
They went to the right place. And they've come back to the right place.
If they were really thinking, they'd manage to spend a couple days in Hawaii on the way home.
Maybe that's what Joe Allen was trying to tell them this morning when he woke them with that Hawaiian war chant. The background intercom audio as we
there's
hear
that Russian trawler.
There's the Russians, yes. We can't say exactly how far away they are, but obviously they're not very far from the Okinawa because this picture is being taken from the Okinawa.
And obviously...
The Okinawa now 3.5 miles from the command module.
And obviously that Russian trawler tug had a lot of radio and radar antenna on it.
I really don't know what they could gain by this. We don't have any secrets in this program, and we've gone through the entry a million times.
Yes, but do they know that and believe that?
Well, they know enough to simply sit there in Washington and turn on their television set and watch the whole thing, you know.
They probably think it's all done with animation.
You shouldn't laugh about that. Some people in North Carolina think it's done by animation too, Jules.
ship now reports correction on that 6.5 miles from the command module.
All right, we'll duly note that correction. 6.5 miles. That's not so bad. It's close enough. He'll be picked out of there before too long by the helicopters and taken promptly to the deck of the Okinawa. So the word is good. They're back down, and before long they'll be on the deck. ABC's coverage of the flight of Apollo 15 will continue after this commercial message. Here we are back in the Pacific, some 300 miles or so north of Hawaii. As you can see, the collar is already around the spacecraft. The life raft is there.
Bright.
Still buttoned up. I haven't opened anything yet.
Hatch will be open momentarily.
A bright sunny morning and a rolling sea that calculated not to produce too instant seasickness.
It's just what, a little after 11 o'clock in the morning out there.
And the Okinawa, the recovery vessel, a small aircraft carrier, a landing pad helicopter weighing some 18,000 tons, is now just a mile and a half or two away from the Endeavour command module here.